Hello, hello, everyone. Oh, yes, it is everybody's favorite time of Wednesday. Hello, good morning, and welcome to Small Biz Talk. If this is your first time joining us, hello, my name is Sadie Reeb, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicating to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. And on that note, I'm going to say hello to Lori. Lori, I am very excited for today because, as always, when we do one of these Ask Me Anything, I learn so much. Either I learn about Lori personal or I learn about some cost of goods, and I have this epiphany about how a small business should run.
I love that you have the cost of goods down, and that is a key phrase for you, Sadie. I wish more people would have the cost of goods. Well, welcome, welcome. This is a two Ask Lori Anything in a month, not intended, but like I said, I just thought I'd hang out. And I always say this when Sadie and I were talking about it before the show. I go, well, I'll either talk for 2 minutes, we'll end it, or, whatever. And Sadie's like, I bet you 11:05 because it never quite ends on time. We always get started. So go ahead and put anything you want to talk about, chat about. All questions are on the table. Just throw it into the question. Sadie will be watching the chat in case you put it in the chat and I don't catch it, but just go ahead and put it in the question box. Okay, I'm just going to go over a few things, and mostly it's upcoming shows. Now, I have a couple people already scheduled for June. I know there's a big break in here. We're definitely having the show. I just don't have all their information yet, so I decided to just give you what I know for sure. So next week, very excited to have Dahlia back on the show. She's one of our resident favorites coming on. And what I've asked her to talk about this time is auditing QuickBooks or auditing your numbers. A lot of people are doing it themselves or have a bookkeeper that doesn't have an accounting background, and they don't know what they don't know, the classic saga. And in that, I can look at their balance sheet and point out certain issues that they're not aware of. But really, you need to be able to look at your own internal documents, independent of what accounting software you're using, and have an idea if something's not right. So Dahlia is going to go over a few things that you can look for. Also, some of the things you should do to reconcile on a monthly basis, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be really good. Then June 24th, David is also a fellow advisor at the SBDC, and I've been wanting someone new to come on and just talk about marketing. I just put marketing down. When I say that, I mean marketing, social media, what's happening out there. I wanted somebody to come on new that we haven't heard from and just give us their perspective on what works, what doesn't work, etc. So I'm very excited to have David come on and talk about that. Now, today, what I thought I would do is once again answer any of your questions. So as soon as one pops into the Q&A, I'll talk about it. But I decided to do a Lori ramble. Where is my frequent flyers that always said, I love Lori's ramble or rant or whatever we call it, soapbox. But really, I didn't want to necessarily go through any big teaching today unless it's a question. So I decided just to act as if I was interviewed. So I thought about my progression of we could call it career, I guess, if you want, but what I learned along the way. So I'm just going to start telling a story. When I see a question, if I see a question, I will address it, or any questions about what I'm talking about. But here we go. And many of you that have been frequent flyers, that's what I call people who've been on the show a lot. and you've heard me mention little bits and pieces about my story and my life. You've heard this, but never strung together, just like little insights. So what I thought I would do is, take the highlights. Life is long, but take the highlights, those that specifically led me to where I am in my understanding of business. So I'm being the host interviewing and the guest being interviewed. So many of you have heard me say that my humble beginnings was on a farm. So I was born in upstate New York, a very, very small country town. We did not have even a street light. I mean, it was what we would call podunk. I always thought that I was in a small town, but I understand now I was actually considered podunk. My family, my grandparents were farmers. My father worked in automation at the Ford plant. He would drive into Buffalo, a little bit of a trek to get there, and he worked nonstop. And he really was, I guess you could say I came from a simple family in many ways, not like this lovely Beaver Cleaver family by no means, but simple in the concept that we were definitely blue collar workers in a blue collar world. My mother also had a lot of side businesses as well as my mother and my father together. They had a window business that they had because I guess when I was younger or before I was even born, there was a lot of layoffs. So they always had a side business, and everybody in the country, either mostly worked for themselves in some capacity. That's why you'll hear me talk a lot about how I was around mom and pops, because we didn't really have much industry. We had a canning company. I can't remember what it was. And I think we had some kind of, I can't remember, like a flute company or something like that, but that was it. And they were very small companies. So most people were farmers or they sold to the local community, the tire person, the bakery, etc. That's pretty much what it was like. So when I was extremely young, probably way too young, if I want my opinion on it, I went to work on the farm, my grandparents' farm, and then the neighbor farms, picking strawberries. And it was really probably a good lesson. It was hard work. I can remember being cold in the wintertime and having to tie cauliflower and, just being exhausted. And I remember at a very young age, I thought to myself, I really, really want to be paid for what I know, not what I do. Now, it's interesting that I even came to this distinction because I look at it later on and I was really making the first distinction between a white collar, blue collar job, career. Although those words I didn't even know, they were not in my vocabulary. We didn't talk about that at all, right? But I can see that I started to get this concept that I was so tired and exhausted at such a young age. I was like, I want to be paid for what I know, what I absolutely know. And so that's where I started to think about, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of here, right? Now, nobody really went to college, but my sister actually did. She went away to college, and she was 13 years older than me. And I didn't have a whole lot of experience with her, but I know she went away to college. I got it in my head at that time. Like I said, I don't know where I got these things in my mind, but I made this distinction that education would get me off the farm. Now, I didn't think like education. I think I just believed that the only way I could get paid for what I know is to know something, and I had to get information to get off the farm. Everything was get off the farm at that point. Okay, I just wanted to get off the farm. So I ended up all on my own because I didn't have like a supportive family. It wasn't along that lines at all. And I ended up convincing my local principal that I wanted to graduate a year early. And they said if I could apply to a school and get applied and get accepted, I could, graduate early. Once again, get off the farm, get off the farm. And my sister had gone and under what she did, and I don't know where she even came up with it, but she became a lab technician. And so my mother basically explained to me, I didn't have any understanding of the outside world, guys. I'd never been outside the farm, right? But basically explained to me that if I wanted to get off the farm, I had to go to be a lab tech. So it was, to me was, I go become a lab tech or I stay on the farm. That was the only two choices I know. And she had me sign this document, which was a loan I took out for myself. I didn't know what I was doing, just signed the document, started school, started going for this position to be this lab tech. I saw my sister do it and said, okay, this gets me off the farm. Now, at that point in time, what happened is I did really good in school and I got a 2 year degree and I started going to the fourth year degree. And in school, it was interesting, but I had absolutely no desire ever to be a lab tech. Okay. I got applied associates in science. I was continuing with the 4 years. And this is not me at all. I was like, blood, people sick. No, this is not me at all. So here because I started school early, I was probably only like 21 and had my first like midlife crisis. I'm actually moved out of the house. I moved out of the house really young. So I'm on my own, 2021, working as a lab tech and just miserable and thinking, I just don't want to do this. And what I knew I wanted, but I didn't understand, was I wanted to be in business. I don't know if any of you guys remember, it's so long ago, but I think it was a sitcom called Dallas, and her name was Alexis or something like that. And she was this businesswoman. I wanted to be this businesswoman. This was the sitting on my farm looking at pictures on TV of what I wanted to be. So I tried to continue with this being a lab tech, and it just was miserable. I hated it. I was working in a lab in the middle of the night, and emergencies were coming in. I finally just had full burnout, and I just quit. I just quit. And then I tried to find a job, and I wanted to be in business. But of course, people were like, do you type? No. I draw blood. Do you do this? No. And so I had a really hard time even getting a job. And somebody finally hired me in. I was like 22 in customer service. And this was a traditional typesetting before the desktop publishing came into play. So once again, I've always excelled. I've been very smart. I've been very hardworking, and I was in the customer service, and I did very well, just kind of helping within this traditional typesetting arena. And I was there for several years, and they had an outside sales force, right? And my boss came up to me, and I'm probably only 25 at this point, and said, I think you would be good in sales. And I can remember this so well. I don't know why. But I said to her, well, you guys come in from where you go, and I see you, and then you go. I don't know what you do. I know you meet with clients, but I don't know what that means. And she said, fair enough, come and ride with us in the car for a couple days. So I did. And I was like, oh, this is like a party, because it was advertising, it was typesetting, it was all selling to advertising companies, and there was lunches, and it was fun. And I was like, oh, you go and you shake hands and you talk to people. Okay, I can do that. But I also had the technical knowledge from being in customer service. So I transitioned slowly. I was like part customer service, part sales, right? And then finally I said, okay, I'm going to become a salesperson. Now, this was the change, because this caused me to have to change in so many different ways, because now I'm meeting with executives and I still had that country way of being. My language patterns were not acceptable in that world. And so it really was like a fast growth of how to be this business person, how to become this Alexis on TV that I wanted to be. And it was quite an exploration of identity. I remember going to this seminar and watching this woman. I'm 62, I'm like 23 then. So this is so long ago, but this woman giving a speech in this business suit. I'm just admiring her and thinking, I want to be like that. I want to look like that. And so it was a matter of going and buying the suits and like being this person that I had in my mind's eye I wanted to become. Now, the typesetting company, I was at a good 5 years and I ended up being the top salesperson there and doing quite well. But there was a change happening within the industry, and it was called the Macintosh computer. And I told you lesson number one was I wanted to, get paid for what I knew, not what I did. This is where lesson number two that really, really stayed with me for a very long time. I remember the boss, the owner of the company came in, and I asked him this question because I was going out to a lot of the clients, and out of a concern for me, because my clients really did like me, they kept saying to me, Lori, the Macintosh is coming into play. It's going to cut down and eliminate traditional typesetting. What are you going to do? Well, here I thought I finally found myself. I'm 24, I'm making good money. I'm a salesperson. I understand the advertising industry. I'm thinking, I got it. I got this, right? And I came back to him, and there's these moments in our lives where we remember them as if they just happened yesterday. And I said to him, his name was Ken, Ken, my clients keep saying to me that our industry is going away, that the Macintosh is here. And of course, I use the word displaced now. I wouldn't have used that back then, but basically, we're going to be gone. It's going to, eliminate our company. And he said to me, he goes, Lori, I have heard that for years. Don't believe it. They say it all the time. I was young. I didn't know. I was like, oh, okay, life's good. A year later, that company shut down. 1 year later. Now, it had been coming for a long time. He could have been aware of it. I was, and I was starting to be because my clients knew, but literally in 1 year. Now, this was a turning point for me. And you might have heard me as you listened to me how I talked about an article I wrote, how sandcastles disappear in a day, how a business model cannot necessarily last for a lifetime or passed on to your children and your children after that. And now it's lucky if it lasts, a couple of years with the way things change. But this was early on for me, seeing immediately, don't get uber comfortable. I'm not saying be uncomfortable, but don't get to the belief that because something has always been, it will always be. I think that was a very good lesson. So there was a company that was investing in the new technology. They knew I had a large client base and they contacted me. I'm probably 25 now, and they wanted me to work for them. They were the latest technology. My clients started using them. It seemed like a good fit. I went and met with them, and I was pretty well known at this point because I had these clients for years and I had a large client following. And so they asked me to come on board. And I said, well, if I do, this is my person that takes care of the customer service. This is the production person. Everybody kind of has to go if this whole client load comes with me. So after a while, it was agreed that everybody was going to come, two other people. We were all coming on board. And I agreed because this ship was sinking. I had no choice, right? So I went to this new place and I worked feverishly and took every one of the clients and got them into the new place. So it looked like I was good. I was on a roll. I'm in this new place. It's got the latest technology. I have all my clients, pretty much everybody moved, got a big book of business, making good money. In fact, even, I leave a part out at about a year earlier on my own, I bought my first house. I mean, I was doing well, cheap, not, of course it was back then. I think I paid 60,000 for the house. It was brand new, but nevertheless, I bought my first house, right? So I had my mortgage, I had different situations going. And I was there about 6 months, got all of the clients to transfer over. And one day It was owned by this woman who had been a traditional typesetter and was using this new equipment. And her husband was in construction, owned a construction crew, and quit that and went to work for the company. He's kind of a gruff type person, and he kind of oversaw everything with a fairly heavy hand. And I'll never forget this. Ready for lesson number 3? Lesson number 3 was a hard one to swallow. You guys sitting on the edge? Because let me give you a preview. I cried for days. Okay. I cried for days. And you ready, guys? This is when I became an entrepreneur. The owner of the company called me in the middle of me out. In fact, it was Valentine's Day. I was dropping off Valentine cupcakes to my clients. I'll never forget. And he said, his name was John. Lori, I need you in the office right now. Like, what in the world? What could I have done to be recorded in the office? I'm like, I'm out here. I'm dropping off Valentine. Nope, need you in the office right now. So I was like, okay. I walk in the office and it was a glass office, and he was sitting at the edge, the corner's chair in this boardroom, and just sitting there like he was fuming. And there was documents on the table. I walked in and he handed me a document and he said, you need to sign this if you want to work here anymore. Now, remember, this is a long time ago. What it was a non-compete. In Texas, that long ago, non-competes mattered. I think what had happened, and I thought of it then, but I know it now, my clients came on board and it consisted now of way over 60% of his business. He was hiring more people. I think he was afraid that I would take the clients like I did to him to someone else. I sat there and I looked at that paper, and the paper scared me, guys. I'm just going to say it scared me. To me, it was the end of the road. Like, for me, my money came from my clients. If I handed them over and I had no control of my clients anymore and I couldn't take them with me, I was under his control, which already was bad, So I said, I have to think about it. And I came home and I got in my pajamas and I went in my bed and I cried. I just cried and cried. I didn't know what to do. But the old Lori, that's the one I got born with, that always has the spirit and might that I don't even know where it comes from, but always takes over. And I remember my grandfather, I'm all German. He used to have this saying all the time, like, it was always, and I don't know if anybody have heard this, it's an old expression, I guess, in German. I don't know. He would say, not by a damn side. Somebody would offer him a lesser price for beans on the market and he'd go, not by a damn side, right? And I always had that, no, you're not going to own me. And no one could own me. It was always that no one could own me. So the next day I woke up and I thought about it and I thought, look at what's happened. I got in a career I didn't like. I found a career I liked. A company went under that was not my control. Then I go and work really hard to bring them work here. Now they're wanting me to sign a non-compete. And I'm always like thinking things are okay. And then I'm finding out at the last minute, unbeknown to me, they're not. And I got it in my head that if things went terribly wrong, I wanted to know about it ahead of time. I wanted to have choices. You hear me talk about that a lot. I wanted to have options. I wanted to be able to do something about it. So for some reason, don't ask me why. And remember, the internet was not invented for a long time. I got in my car. I drove down to the courthouses and I opened up, which would be a DBA. Okay, a sole prop. I got a business name is what I did. And the business name was The Right Source. I didn't know what the company was going to do, but we were going to source something and it had to be the right source. I went to other competitors and that offered the same thing. And I had like this really nice 2 guys that had this small company. And I said, if I get client work, can I bring it to you? So basically, guys, I was brokering, right? I was brokering and I was like getting a client, taking their job over to here and then taking it back to the client, thinking if I just brokered a few, I could make some money till I figured out what I'm going to do, right? That's all I knew. I didn't want to go work for another company. I could have. I just didn't know. So I started doing that. Now, the lesson I learned from this place with the non-compete is you really have to be brave enough sometimes, but also understand what game you're playing, what you want, but what you need financially as well. So with the right source, I started doing this brokering thing, and I got enough clients that I asked my friend Brian, who had come to me with the other company, to come on board. He needed a salary, he had bills. So I paid him a salary. I wasn't really getting paid that much, but I did everything I could to pay him a salary. And I worked nonstop. And we got lots of clients to follow us. And I had people I was, also outsourcing it to. And I remember one day as I'm like in my car, driving to the client, driving here, running the company, doing this crazy stuff. Brian's there typing away. Tanya was somebody we used as an overflow. And I dropped off this job to Tanya. She was at her house, sitting in her pajamas, working calmly. And I thought to myself at that point, seems like Tanya's got it better than I do. I'm like the company owner, everybody thinks is so great, but Tanya's sitting home working in her pajamas and getting paid. And I don't know how much money I'm making. So that was my first insight to brokering and connecting and distribution. If you don't have the right amount of profit, the person doing the work is actually making more money. You hear me talk about the employers making more money than you're making. I got my first insight to that. And the company continued for several years until Brian became ill. I had to replace him, and it just never felt good after that. It was just very challenging. And I think I'd been in business about 5 years. I didn't understand profit. I didn't have a finance background at all. Remember, I still just had my, applied associates in science. And so I didn't understand profitability. And many have heard me talk about this. I went to the CPA. Am I doing okay? Oh, yeah, you're doing great. Everybody told me I was doing great. I was patted on the back of what I've done. But my bank account didn't suggest that at all. And inside, this was a really interesting emotional time because I was terrified of the company failing. Like if the company failed, I failed somehow. It was very connected to me. I was doing anything I could to keep that company alive because if the company that failed, I failed. I was only like 28, 29. I felt like I'd be at the end of the road. Like I would be done. Oh, like everything would end. And I was so connected to it, I couldn't even see past that. I couldn't even see past that. And at a very burned out stage, I went on a trip to California where my sister was living. And I remember walking on the beach and thinking to myself, man, if I could, I would just get rid of the house, get rid of the company, get a job as a salesperson again, and just take a breather. This thought escaped into my mind and got heard by me, which wasn't allowing it to be heard. It got heard. It got heard. And of course, I, couldn't do that. But all the way on that plane trip home, I kept thinking about that. Like I'm just exhausted. I need to rethink this. I'm just at the end of my rope. And when I came home, the universe was really kind. A lot of weird things happened, really weird things happened. I had somebody come over and say, by the way, did you know people were wanting to lease out the homes in this area? You could get somebody to lease it if you ever wanted to. I've been thinking about it. Didn't even know I was thinking about doing that. I was like, really? I was at my company in my office. It was really just me at that point, and a couple of people came in every once in a while. And somebody, the owner, the landlord came in and said, "Can we show your place? Somebody wants to buy the one right next door, and it's not open yet, and it's the same layout." And I said, "Yeah." And I kind of said, "Yeah, and if you want all the furniture, I might sell it too." I mean, I know, like, where did that come from, right? And he goes, "I might think about that." Like, oh, okay. And so the pieces started coming into play for me to make this plan. And I was fighting it, and I was 31, and I kept talking about, everybody would say, I did this, I did that, I did this, the good times have gone, the good times is gone. And I had this personal saying, like, you can't bend done. It's like, I don't want to bend done. Everybody's bend done. I don't want to bend done. So I was 31, and I was like, can't bend done at 31. You just can't bend done at 31. And it finally came to me where I was like, do you really want to move to California? And it seemed like I did. So I did what I wasn't thinking I would ever do. I slowly started untangling my life in Texas, my company, and everything associated. And here's a really good lesson. This one, if you're still hanging out and hearing this like story, here's something really important. I needed to sell all the things I had from the company. I was sitting in my Texas garage. It was 100 degrees out. I had a fan blowing on me. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. Had all these staple guns, all these post-it notes, all this stuff, for the company. And I was sitting there waiting for people to come up and pay 2 cents for a staple gun. And I was thinking to myself, as I was sweating, about all of the evenings, all the days I fell asleep and woke up worried that my company would shut down. All of the events I missed, the friends I didn't have time for, all the things that I just had to build my company, just build my company. That's all I had to do. And then I dawned on me, and I almost could laugh historically or hysterically at myself. In the end, I shut it down. After 5, 6 years of this, I shut it down. And then I asked a very profound question that stayed with me for a very long time. What if? What if I chose differently? What if I went through that process, but I didn't make it about me? I didn't make it like my only option. I didn't have that same emotional belief and fear. What would have been different? What events would I have went to? What would I have enjoyed? You guys know, you've heard me talk about this. This is where it came from. I had plenty of pencils and paper sitting there. I picked up a piece of paper and I wrote on this piece of paper. It was actually an index card. I will no longer regret the past. I will no longer fear the future. I will live in the present moment. I took that index card and I taped it to the steering wheel because in 3 days I was driving to California. And that was taped on my steering wheel the whole time. So with the right source, TRS, as I called it at the time, I learned profit matters. Profit totally matters. And I was not profitable. The Lori today would have sat down and said, Lori, honey, this business isn't good. This isn't good, Lori. I learned that holding on can be very unhealthy, and there was no reason for it. There's always opportunity out there. So holding on can be very unhealthy. And in the end, I chose. What if you control your destiny? What if you don't get owned by anyone? What if you always know there's opportunity? What if you always know you have a choice? What if? Just what if? Only 31. I'm 62 now, guys. That's what I came from. I arrived in California and was quite shocked. Coming from the country, then being in Texas, and then being in California, I was quite shocked. It was very disoriented. I had an apartment that my sister owned, so I could pay her rent, but if I missed rent, I wasn't going to get thrown out. Like I said, I was only 31. And I needed to figure out, but I was an entrepreneur. I wanted to start my own company. But I remember that little conversation I had with on the beach. What if I was an employee in sales? So I started, before I even left Texas, I was sending out resumes. I just wanted to be an employee. I got a lot of job offers. Some of them were interesting. And I decided I didn't want to get caught up in something else again. I have this way of just getting so caught up in things. I get engaged with it. So I said, what job would I absolutely hate? And one of them was selling Canon copiers. I was like, how can I get passionate about a copier? I'll take it. So they wanted me to be a manager. I'm like, no, no management, no nothing, not playing the management game. Just, I want to be just your salesperson. They said, okay, well, negotiate leases then, or sell these big $100,000 units. We're not going to have you selling little tiny copiers. I said, okay, I'll sell your big units. I don't care. Just leave me alone. I just want to be a salesperson. So I start as a salesperson, and I knew sales. I was good at that, and I was selling these big $100,000 Canon copiers, and the clients that they had me call on, because my level of understanding business at this point, were law firms and CPA firms, a lot of copies, right? Well, lo and behold, this little job I was going to take while I was just going to be on the beach and have fun, ended up within a very short period of time making me over six figures. Now, this was interesting because I needed the money. I needed the money. I had paid every last vendor. I drained my bank account. I had a little bit of debt, not a lot, but I needed the money. And I needed the security. I won trips, I went places. I needed it so badly. What I learned, and you've heard me say before, sometimes just get a job. It was great. It was a nice transition. It was a landing spot. It was a retrieve. It was a resting area. I needed it badly. So many people think they sell out if they get a job, if they've been an entrepreneur. No, it was beautiful. But eventually, I got replenished. My money was replenished. My spirit was replenished. I was replenished. And at the end, another lesson is just money doesn't matter. It doesn't. I didn't like what I was doing. So it was back out again. It was back out again, back on my own. So I ended up finding a few clients. Remember, my area of expertise was sales and marketing, really, at this point, right? So I found a few clients that I could get paid for some things, and I left. I left. I had money in the bank. I was so upset with myself in so many ways. I would say to myself that at that point, why, oh, why can't I just be a cubicle girl? Why can't I stay in a company? Why can't I be like everybody else? I would look at these other people and they were just so happy, 20, 30 years. I gave all my accounts to someone else. They were making 200,000. Why can't I just stay? Why do I got to be my own boss and be this adventure and do my own thing? And the spirit's a funny thing. You get born with a certain spirit, and it's gonna just lead you in pathways, and either you fight it, ignore it, or you just go with it. So I jumped ship. I went with it. Had a few clients, and one of the situations that was very, very profound is at Canon, I started getting very comfortable with math. I was doing these lease negotiations, and I learned that, hey, finance, you make money. I could turn around and I could go, oh, I can negotiate this lease and I get this 10%, and I just increased my commission. I really got into numbers. I learned finance and how important numbers were. So I ended up taking this position, not this position, but I was pretty much, kind of working here and there. But I did take eventually where I got paid as an employee for a small $1 million company that set up medical facilities. And I came in just as their VP of marketing. And eventually, it was a small company, became their CEO. And I had to deal with, and I'm like 32, 33, maybe a little bit around there. I can't remember. I had to deal with some of the bankers. And all of a sudden, I'm really interested in all of this. My whole interest is changing. I think I was about 34, 35. I can't remember, guys. I decided, you ready for this? Are you ready for this twist? It's time to go back to school. It's time to go back to school. I wanted an education. I already knew a lot. I didn't feel like I needed information. I felt as though I needed a pedigree degree. I could see other people were being looked at different because they had a pedigree. I was smarter, I knew more, but I needed the degree. I needed it. So while I was employee there, I jumped into heavy school. I finished out my 4 year, got my undergrad in business and administration. I had to pick up a bunch of classes to make my 4 year be about business. And then I looked for my M, my B, and my A. I didn't care. I just wanted a pedigree. I wanted to not be that little blue collar working farming girl. I wanted to be like the people I saw in LA who came from these good schools. I wanted to be like that. See, I still didn't fall into my own identity yet, guys. I was still trying to be. So, where did I have to go to school in my head? Now, I'm not from California. I didn't know, but I'm like Pepperdine or USC or UCLA. I applied. I ended up choosing Pepperdine. I got into their PKE, their President Key Executive Program, and I went at it within taking extra classes, all this. By the time I think I was 40, I had an undergrad in business and I had my MBA. Now, What's interesting, going back to school, I felt, just my personal opinion, guys, like the professors didn't know what they were talking about. I would be like, okay, these theories are great, but that's not what I've seen in the real world. It doesn't work that way. And I just felt like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like they really know. And at one point I got frustrated. I was like, I stay here any longer, I'm going to end up stupid. But I kept saying, all I need is three things: an M, a B, and an A. Just give me that MBA, give me that little pedigree. I'm going to walk out. Um, so as I was getting ready to walk out, I, was getting ready to graduate. I kept remembering, you're going to love this part of the story. I kept remembering how much I didn't understand what those bankers were saying. Now, what ended up happening in my undergrad, that I was getting my classes, I had this great teacher in finance. I got like fascinated with finance by this point. Fascinated, obsessed with it. I wanted to know why I was not profitable in my first company. I wanted that information, right? I got obsessed with finance. So I took every finance class. My MBA was finance. Everything was finance, finance, finance. I just wanted to know. And by the time I was getting ready to graduate, I'm like, I got the finance. I'm missing one piece, that banking. What in the world were those bankers talking about? Okay, guys, you're going to absolutely love this part of the story. You have to tell me in the chat or something what you think of this. I go to my finance professor, an older professor, and I go, I'm going to go become a banker. He goes, Lori, you can't become a banker. You have no banking background. They only hire people that have banking backgrounds. I love your energy, but you cannot become a banker. I go, I'm going to become a banker. I'm going to become a banker, and I'm going to do it for a little period of time while I'm getting started again. So I looked up, what is a banker called? They were like, commercial lender. So I was like, well, let me look up the definition. No, no strong internet there. So I called a bank and said, you hire commercial lenders, right? They go, yeah. I go, what do you do? And what do you have as a criteria to get hired as a commercial lender? And I got asked this bizarre question, really bizarre question. It was really weird. The person on the phone says, have you ever owned a business? I'm like, well, yeah. Can you come in Monday? I'm like, okay. I was like, I don't know why they want me to come in, but I'm going to be able to find out what a commercial lender does. This is great. I walk in, and all they wanted to know is about whether I owned a company. I said, yeah, I had this company. It was called The Right Source. I had it for 5 years, blah, blah, blah. They go, can you start tomorrow? Like, you're hiring me? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're hiring you. I think it was like 60,000 salary. Starting tomorrow, we're hiring you as a commercial lender, VP commercial lender. I'm like, I'm in. Well, I found out, ready for this, guys? They had this weird marketing thing they did where they were telling their clients that we hire bankers that have signed the front of a paycheck. So they had been business owners. They needed 10 people. They had 10 people. Training started on Tuesday. One person dropped out. They needed one person. I was just owned a business. We don't care. You don't know anything about finance. You've never been in banking. You own a business. Come on board. I started trading Tuesday. I was so lost because everybody had been a banker before. But man, I'm in training. I don't care. I'm in training. I was a banker. I hated banking, guys. I hated it. I found out that where I thought banking was about helping companies grow, it's really selling money. And I've been a consultant my whole life, so it was a really weird thing to just be about selling money. But I was getting the contacts, I was getting an understanding, and I committed to at least 6 months to this gig. But what I found is that it was really about the financial reports. And I remember this one day, another interesting first learning. This one day, I finally got somebody to give me financial documents, and I ran back to the team to give them all these documents they asked me to gather, right? And I'm like still trying to study them all from my learning in school. And here's the profit and loss and everything. And within 5 seconds, they go, not bankable. And I was like, these people are so smart. They read all that in 5 seconds. I wasn't even to the first part of the P&L. Then I learned later, no, they did 3 math equations. That's all. So I still was in this looking at everybody else like they were so smart. I didn't understand the way the game was played. That 6 months taught me a lot about the game. Okay. When I grew up on the farm, it was pretty simple. You could understand. Somebody picked up a bushel of beans, they put it on the truck, they got paid so much, the bushel of beans was there, they got paid to pick the bushel of beans. The farmer got paid to grow the beans. The dairy farm got paid to grow, raise, and milk the cows. Everything was very obvious. In banking, you got paid to do these weird things, have dinner, have meetings, have all this stuff. It was a whole different world I'd never been exposed to. So I learned in banking, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. It's a different set of rules. And there's lots of deals, and there's a private world of events and negotiations and deals. And that people that make money may not be the smartest in the room, okay? And a lot of them came from money. So this whole like comparing myself with other people, they're so smart, look what they did. Oh no, what connections did they have? Who did they know? Who made a deal behind the scene? It was something I'd never understood, never understand. So banking was done. I was out of there, had enough of it. I start my company, guys. I got the company now. It was called LW and Associates, and it was turnaround. I went in as a CFO. I started helping companies, and I had banking relationships galore. I knew all the investment bankers. That's all I did at the bank was I made sure I met everybody. I knew everybody. I could get funding. And for 10 years, my company did turnarounds. I'd go into companies that were in trouble, 10 to 60 million. I had the full finance. I had the operations. I had the marketing. I had the sales. I got it. I did well. I was in LA. I had my Mercedes. I was invited to the parties. I was Alexis from Dallas. I was. I became her. But over a period of time, I realized inside I was not Alexis from Dallas. Oh, yeah. I had the car. I had the whole thing. I became her, but I wasn't her. I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to my roots. I really, really, really missed working with the small companies. I missed I just picked a bushel of beans and I know what that value is. I missed it. I was making good money off the turnaround. I couldn't see how that was going to change, but I was doing what I always did, consult, speak, and write. And I was asked to come on a radio show. And I decided that I wanted to have a division of my company. I just called it a division that really focused on small companies. But if I started talking about small companies, my big turnarounds would be like, you can't get paid that amount. You're just a small business consultant. And if I talked about small business, they go, you don't understand anything. You're just a big turnaround banking deal maker, right? So I had to have a separation. So it was just about time to get on this radio show when I decided I needed a different name. So I called my division of my company Business Simply Put. You guys might recognize that name. On the back of my card, I had Business Simply Put because I had ebooks, I had on-site seminars. I had to think about what was before webinar. I had on-site seminars. I had this whole thing, but I was not getting paid enough to give up the turnaround. Now I was still CFO, interim CFO a lot. So I had this interim CFO, but I'm having what I called my ebooks because technology came in and my on-site seminars, right? And I remember I walked in and I told my friend, I go, look, and I showed the back of my card. And I go, look, I'm doing all this. I'm talking to small businesses and I'm taking all this wisdom I got and I'm bringing it back to small businesses. And he was an older friend of mine and he flipped over the card and he says to me, this gives me goosebumps. I predict someday that'll be the front of your card. I go, oh, I wish. I don't know how I could ever make money, just working with small companies, but I sure would like to. LW and Associates, eventually the name went away. I still do interim CFO work, but not big turnaround. I focused on small companies, and that's where I am today. And that's where you guys know me. And this is why I know so much. You ask me often, how do you know so much? I tell you I'm old. Now I told you the story. I connected all the dots. What did I learn about LW and Associates and the turnaround and the Business Simply Put and all of that? I learned what mattered to me. Flexibility matters a lot. freedom is huge. Freedom is huge. Don't want anybody controlling me or my pathway. I learned to sell my own skills. I learned to stay in my own lane. I figured out what I was good at, and how I could find a market around that. I learned that big project and making deals, it's exciting. That time as LW Associates, a turnaround, I had the lawyers and the bankers and everybody in the room. Very exciting, but exhausting. Very exhausting for me. I learned how to become my own, rely on myself. And I learned how to make a living, a good living on what I knew. Not what I physically could do, but what I knew. So where am I going next? Well, I'm also an enrolled agent. I'm going to open the tax preparing side of my business. Next year, I'm going to be doing more videos and more webinars through my business Simply Put, and continue to be here with you guys through SBDC. But mostly what I've learned and where I'm going at this direction is I still have as much of a just for business as I had my whole life. I feel like I could be that 40-year-old just getting out of the MBA school. I don't feel any older or any different, but I feel wiser. And this next go around, I'm going to take everything I know and what I learned that I wrote on that index card so long ago, not regret the past, not fear the future, and live in the present moment. And I don't know how long I'm going to be alive on planet Earth, but I'm going to have one hell of a good time. And all this wisdom I collected, I'm going to share as much as I can. Okay, I got a few minutes. I'll go into questions that you asked. Hopefully I didn't bore you, but I used an Ask Lori Anything to fill in all of the blanks. And I figured if you came on the show today, you got to hear the story. Okay, Dora, I got a lot of business networking events. How do you turn a new connection from a stranger to client lead? We'll ask that from David, okay? That's a really, really good question. And, you know, a lot of people will make comments on it, but I stay in my own lane, man. And so keep that question. David will be here to discuss marketing at the end of the month. Let's bring that one back up, okay? So make sure you keep that one and bring it back up. Anonymous, in that spirit of getting off the farm, what is your opinion on the best AI tools to learn? I'm reading that AI won't replace people, but will replace people who don't know how to use it. Anonymous, I love your question. I love your question. And I feel very qualified in my own opinion, to answer that. You know, got a few minutes, I'll tell you this. So you guys have heard me mention, I'm not going to tell you the whole story on this, but about a year and a half ago, I bought a piece of property and I decided to excavate it and build on the property. And because it's so remote, I ended up having to do it myself. And so I bought a complete tool shed and everything. And I have struggled a lot. I'm doing a lot of construction, a lot of building. And I came up with this statement recently that said, you can fake being a white collar worker. I've seen a lot of CEOs, finance people, you name it. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. You can fake being a white collar worker pretty easily sometimes, unfortunately, but true. You can't fake being a blue collar worker. My damn sliders were off by a 16th of an inch and I couldn't get the door to open. You have to be so friggin' precise. Until you've done this, you don't know and understand and respect the level of skill from these individuals. AI is not going to replace a lot of that because it's critical thinking. It's definitely a critical thinking that humans are giving up. Humans are giving up and allowing AI to do, but I find AI still doesn't have it to that degree because humans have some very interesting characteristics if they learn how to use them that AI doesn't, and that's intuition. That's discernment. That's judgment. You've heard me talk about discernment. Being able to identify what's true, what's real, what will work, what won't work. I use SuperGrok a lot, and I use SuperGrok constantly to help me with everything, but I stay in control and I stay in knowledge. I don't just take the answer and go, I got to go. I actually am looking for a whole systems answer on some of the construction I'm doing. I had SuperGrok walk through it, and then I took the same thing and put it back into SuperGrok again and said, this is an idea. What do you think? It started a new discussion, like getting a new opinion. I'm still following those same new opinions, rulings all the time. So I think that AI will replace, just like AI, not AI, but the computer replaced the entire typesetting industry. But oh my God, if I would still be exactly where I was today, that wouldn't have been a productive, exciting life. I think it's about fighting things. I think it's about learning where to go. And I think fear is not a good motivator. It's not a good motivator. I have said the other day, I think where there's going to be a lot of opportunity to AI is people who can still think, people who can still put it together. Here's the thing to hear. People who see AI as an incredible tool and use it to be better at what they do and what they know. That's what I use it for. Give me a assessment of this idea. Look at my drawing. Give me a resource. What's wrong with this idea? Will this idea work? What is the cause and effect of it? What other things should I consider? I use it to be really good at what I do. At first, when I used AI, I thought, oh, I can see how it's going to replace humans. Then when AI told me to make this huge cabinet on the bench and lift it over my head in a closed door, and I said to the AI, obviously you don't have hands and feet, because how is this going to fit through the front door and I'm going to lift it? Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So it's got its limitations. There's always an opportunity out there. So I think the minute we just huddle like I did when I was at the right source and said, oh, I got to hold on. Oh, this is all I got. We shut off any possibilities of not only business and career, but our life. So I think it's got a lot of great benefits. I think it could change our lives, but I don't think it's a threat. Okay, let's pretend for a second, though. Let's have a pretend Einstein thought experiment. AI takes over all jobs, makes everything cheaper and easier to do. And we're all sitting in our backyard drinking umbrella drinks because we don't have to work anymore because AI is doing it for us. Is that so bad? I think I'd take up painting. So really, when we're saying it may make life better and easier, seriously, so has a lot of things. Even the stove. We don't have to rub sticks together and make a fire anymore. So who's to know if it can't improve it, because we don't have to work crazy hours to make so much money to just live. The future has not been told yet. Don't tell it for yourself. Just keep your eyes open. Be in the present moment. Really explore the intuition that a human has, and you'll find out what opportunity there is. Tara, throughout the years, when you have found yourself in the painful and challenging places entrepreneur-minded people tend to find themselves, what practices and activities have you employed to keep your head above the waves until you reach the solid ground again? There was a time back when I was going to school that I just could not figure out where things were going to get better. I just didn't know. And I went to that old professor that had told me about finance, and I was talking with him, and I was like, and then I don't know, and I can't get it out, and this and this. Blah, blah, blah. I'm just going on and on and on and on. And he listened, and he listened, and he listened. And then he said to me, a long time ago, I went on a trip to India. And I'm like, I got problems. I don't want to hear about your trip to India. But he didn't stop. So I was like, okay. And while I was in India, I rented a car. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to go on forever. Okay, I'm sitting here. I got to listen to him. He's older. He wants to talk to me about this trip to India. So I sat back in my chair and said, we're going to listen to this trip for India. He says, I was driving the car. If you've ever been to India, he said to me, there's elephants and noise and cars and traffic, and it's everywhere. Well, in the middle of this intersection, the car broke down and stopped. I was scared. I was panicked. There's elephants coming at me. All this stuff is happening. And he said, the very first thing I had to tell myself, and Tara, this answers your question. This story has stayed with me. The very first thing I had to tell myself is, I won't be in this forever. I won't be in this forever. Then the next thing I have to acknowledge is there is a process to get out of this. I just have to figure out the process. I have reflected on that story so many times. When I find myself, which life is about it, it's going to happen again and it could happen tomorrow, at what we can call a dead end road, I say, I'm not going to be in this forever. And there's a process. I just have to figure out what it is. Thank you for listening to me. Hopefully I have given you something to take away. If not, I hope I've entertained you. Sadie, it's 11 o'clock and I am done.
Well, see, you're done talking, but we're gonna do a couple of things. So I don't know, 11:05. I'm calling it 11:05 because I see a lot of thank yous in there. And let's see. Oh, here's a random one. Do you think
Okay.
that phone call to the bank changed your trajectory?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That weird phone call to the bank completely changed my trajectory. I would have never been in finance like I am. Never, ever, ever. Oh, it put me where I'm supposed to be. I hated math. I hated finance. I couldn't do any of that. If it wasn't for that phone call to the bank, oh no, I was not in control of that. Something else put me in that bank position for sure. Very painful. I hated it. It was an awful experience, but oh yeah, it like literally just picked me up. I was like running like this, picked me up, turned me here, and set me back down and set me in that direction. Oh, and by the way, you know how I started doing on-site seminars. So I was like, okay, business simply put, I want business simply put to make some money on its own. So I set this goal that I needed it to start making money so I wouldn't have to do the turnaround. So I said, I'm going to try to make $1 from speaking and teaching. That was my goal, just make $1. So I decided to do these on-site seminars in LA, and it was to teach financial statements. And I was going to have all these company owners come, and they were all going to come and take my webinar, or I keep saying webinar, seminar. And I think I charged $75 for the seminar. I put it in LA Journal or whatever it was at the time. I rented space and said, okay, let's give this a try. Well, I had at this point this huge, huge email database, right? But what were they? They were all bankers, but I had to advertise to someone. So I advertised to my entire banking database that I had the seminar. Can you guys believe that the bank started sending me all their new recruits for training and did for quite some time, as long as I had that? I was making 30,000 a year in my classes, my on-site seminars, training new bankers. So yeah, that, and then it just went into my own ebooks and everything. That trajectory completely changed me. Completely did. Sadie, any other random questions or things I could address? We don't have a time frame here. Anything else? Great for picking that one out.
Well, I think it has just more of like, I think everyone feels, I mean, and we always go back to this thing of like, we have this small biz community. So definitely there's a lot of love in the chat, I would have to say, because I think it just resonates. I mean, for me, I call it the origin story, right? Where it's like, it's so interesting how we get to where we are. And then it's like kind of like that phone call. And it's all these little things where you're just like, I don't know. I think it's the not being afraid, and the not being afraid is like almost like the hardest thing to do. But once you get there, you're just like, what's the worst that can happen? Like you tried, right? Like, so I don't know. Like for me, I say thank you so much for sharing your story because it always reminds us like, you're never done. Like I think that's what an entrepreneur is. Like that was that nug in there where you're like, why couldn't I just be comfortable? And it's like, it's so true. Like I look at people and it's like, I wish and it's like, it's not a judgment, but it's like, it would be nice. It would be nice to just like, okay, I go in, I do my thing, and then I leave.
You got to be who you're set to be. So now, hopefully, a lot of the things I say when I say you have to know your profit, you don't want to be more tired and more broke, you guys know I'm speaking from my biography. I'm actually saying it because I understand. Okay. Thank you for being there. Thank you for listening to the origin story. I like that, Sadie. And I hope you had fun today. I hope you had fun today. See you next week. when we have Dahlia come on and we have a guest speaker, and we're going to have a lot of fun and learn a lot. So thank you guys for always being there. Thank you, Sadie. And I'll see everybody next week on Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Bye, everybody.
11:05. Alrighty, guys. So I don't know if we need anything in the chat. I put our contact information in there for reaching out to Lori. Let me put in the last shows for you to see. We put a bunch of episodes up. I know people love to catch up, see what the back was. I know, wasn't that awesome? Like I said, I love an origin story because, we aren't born with knowledge, right? We got to learn it. It comes from somewhere. So, yes, our small biz community in effect. And this is why Lori is such an awesome advisor, a person to seek knowledge from because she has been there. Alrighty, guys. So I am gonna put a couple of more clicks in here. If you want to get in contact with Lori, I know people have been reaching out. So let me put this guy in there for you. I'm gonna put myself on mute. But please let me know if you need anything. I feel good. It's the only way I can describe it. I love me an origin story, and we just heard it live. Didn't have to go to a movie theater for it. Alrighty, guys, going on mute.